our shirt, pattern number 6932. And in our first steps, we've already put on our interfacing, and now we're going to start sewing. Our first steps are going to be steps 4 through 10, and it is doing the pockets. So let's get started. You should find your pocket piece, have your pattern ready. So our pocket piece is number 3. So let's get 3, and we're gonna have to get our front piece ready. So find pattern piece number 2. So put pattern piece number 2 off to the side, and you should already have your interfacing attached to it. So 3 and 2 and the instructions. So our first step is, we've already marked it. So marking it just means we're going to do a clip right here at the fold line on both sides, and then we can remove our pins, and we can remove our pattern piece, and we're going to just work with one pocket. So we're going to put the other pocket aside, and my iron is hot, so I'm going to press it. So step number 4, to the wrong side, so to the not so pretty side, I'm going to press that top edge 1/4 of an inch down. So I'm going to press this top edge 1/4 of an inch down, and I'm eyeballing it, but you can use a seam gauge if you want to be accurate. So that's 1/4 of an inch, this top edge down to the wrong side, so the not pretty side. Then I'm going to go to step number 5. I'm going to turn it over into the pretty side, or the right side. I'm going to fold it down. So where I clipped it, that fold line, I'm going to fold it. And so right where I clipped it, that's where I'm going to fold it and press it. And so it's almost like an accordion. Right here is where I pressed it first, and now I'm pressing it again. And I'm going to just pin that, because my next step, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch down this whole side, on the corner diagonal, and across this diagonal at 5/8 of an inch. So down to keep that in place, down to keep that in place, and so basically around the whole thing, I'm going to stitch at 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go do that on my sewing machine. So I just finished stitching down this side, around the corner, across the bottom corner, up the side. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to carefully cut at an angle here and here. Get rid of those little triangles. And then I'm going to flip this top to the right side. And I'm going to just take the points of my scissors, and I'm going to push out those corners so that those corners are nice and square. And then with my iron, I'm going to, everywhere where I have that stitching line, I'm going to use that stitching line as a guide to know where to press my seam allowance to the back of my pocket. So I'm going to go down the side, nice and straight. I'm going to go down the other side, nice and straight. Oops, I want to make sure it's nice and straight. If I have any long threads, I'm going to get rid of those, because I don't want those showing up. I'm going to go press that top down, make sure it's got a nice corner, nice 90-degree angle corner. I want to make sure there you go. And now I want to do the bottom up before I do those corners. That kind of hexagon corner that I sewed. And I'm following those that stitching line that I as my guide. That's why I don't need a seam gauge to know where to fold these. I'm not measuring anything. I'm just using the stitching guide, the stitching lines as guides. And after I do all that, I'm going to turn it to the right side and make sure that it looks nice and straight and even. It's really, okay. It's nice. It's a little, over here I'm seeing a little bit, it's a little bit puckery, so I want to give it a nice press. Because I have one more step before I can put it onto the front of my pocket. One side looks really nice. The other side is a little bit wonky, so I'm going to pull it out just a little bit. I'm just going to tug on it to get it nice and straight. So if I'm not getting it really nice and straight, I don't want to sew it to the front of my shirt, because when I'm wearing this, it's, you know, it's going to be noticeable. So I want a nice sharp corner there. And I want a nice corner on that one. So I'm going to give it, I love spray starch, so I'm going to give it a nice spray with some spray starch, and that will help me a little bit. Still not exactly how I want it. Okay, I'm going to fix that. Okay, so before I can attach it to my shirt, I need to stitch down. See how this flap is still, that would not work, because if I put stuff in my pocket, it's going to get stuck under there. So I'm going to take my pins, pin that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch that down. It's going to be exactly an inch. So I like, you can stitch it so you can see it, because you want to get it right on the edge, but you get a nicer looking stitch if you stitch it from the right side, and you know that it's an inch. So I can use one of my seam guidelines on my sewing machine to use this straight edge as a guide and stitch a straight line straight across and do a nice back stitch. You want to be really careful to not knot it up at the end. So hold on to your tails. Okay, so I finished my pocket and it's ready to go on the front of my shirt. If you look at the front of your shirt, you'll see that there are 2 dots here, and if you look at your pocket pattern piece, you'll see that those 2 dots match the 2 dots on your pattern front. So that's exactly where we're going to place our pocket. So we've already marked our pattern front, and since we're just doing one pocket front, if you're right-handed, you're going to put your pocket into your left, on your left front, shirt front. So I'm going to find my left shirt front, and it should already be marked for me. So I've already got it ready. So I'm going to put my right shirt front to the side, and I'm going to have it right here. If you have the right side facing, it might be hard to see, but there's my dot, there's my marking there, there's my marking there. It lines up with these dots, but of course you won't be able to, might not be able to see that on the camera. So I'm just going to put the corners of my pocket match up with the corners where I have those dots. I'm going to put it right there, and then I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin that in place. I've got another thread I need to clip. And then once it's on there, I need to sew that in place. I'm going to sew it right on the edge. And on your pattern instructions, there is a picture of how to do those corners. On the corner of the pocket, to reinforce that pocket to make it stronger, you sew a little triangle. You can back stitch that corner pocket, or you can do that little triangle. Usually it's typical to find that reinforced triangle on a shirt pocket. So you can look at your instructions and follow just that picture to try to imitate that if you'd like. Okay, and then I'm gonna go do that and I'll be right back. And there is our pocket. Give it a press and we will go on to the next step.